Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Valeria and this is the Off-Road Range. Like many people, I interact with different groups of people, different by education, profession and nationalities. Thanks to my friends who highlight me my shortcomings, thanks to my interaction with different people on various issues from friendship to construction, and thanks to my own observation, including on social networks, I decided that it would be important to raise the topic of communication of people with each other, namely about the culture of communication, about attitude towards each other, about the norms of communication, about the meanings inherent in speech, about vocabulary and the ability to express thoughts. In addition, there are major shortcomings in my communication with other people and in my attitude toward them. There are major issues on my perception of the reality, in my socialization skills, in my assessing behavior and experience, and in understanding who a person really is. So partly, I'm talking about this for myself and not as a guidance for someone on how to communicate with other people. I want to note that preparing various topics for you greatly expands my knowledge, changes my attitude towards understanding the world, improves my ability to formulate and express my thoughts, to better convey the meaning of what I'm thinking about, and greatly expands my horizons and vocabulary. Yes, I have a script to what I'm talking about. Some people perceive it as fake speech, but I believe that not even every expert can speak impromptu on serious significant topics. And in order to maximize the disclosure of the topic, it is necessary to prepare. So why did I decide to talk about communication culture? It is an important aspect of human existence and interaction. It is an indicator of his development as a person. It is a strong factor in success in society, and not in the generally accepted concept of success, but in self-realization and happy, sincere interaction with people. And a very important point, the quality of communication is now very low. Why? We will discuss it later. And you also share your opinion. Communication of highly developed organisms is historically characterized by the presence of speech, creativity, a high level of socialization, and history. All this together manifests itself in the variety of communication culture. The culture of communication is a very multifaceted, psychologically complex issue, as it involves many areas of life on different scales, from tiny remote villages to international business etiquette, as an example. This greatly complicates the understanding and the perception of what a culture of communication is. And moreover, over the past 40 years, people have been actively involved in the era of social digitalization, where the ease of presentation and perception of information prevails. As a result, at a minimum, a person is not interested in immersing himself in complex forms of existence. And, in general, a person is already comfortable and there is no need to make any efforts. This, of course, leads to a strong degradation of humanity. But this is a separate topic for discussion. And if you want, I will consider this aspect of life separately. Today we will talk about the modern world generally accepted culture of speech, which has fairly standardized norms that are acceptable in most social groups, since this is the base of human communication. We will talk about it briefly, since this aspect of human life has been studied throughout the entire existence of mankind. The culture of speech reflects the culture of the individual to a large extent and manifests itself in interpersonal interaction. Any society has its own system of norms and rules of behavior, which makes the communication between people as effective as possible. It assumes a number of basic rules. These norms of behavior are characteristic of a specific highly moral society. They correlate with the principles and level of personal development and education of the participants in communication. They relate in a certain way to individual rights and freedoms. They assume the existence of a certain hierarchy with compliance with these norms and with consequences. The culture of speech reflects the level of good manners, education, and erudition. It reveals a person's value system, his moral and ethics standards and qualities. It is a characteristic of highly developed personality when the nature of his communication really correlates with his internal ideals and standards. Otherwise, sooner or later, this duality will be revealed. And people who are good at understanding other people will realize it pretty quickly. However, similar people are attracted, though they will not remain lonely but find a company. In addition to the ethics of speech communication, that is, the culture of speech, there is etiquette, which determines behavior in certain situations and specific formulas of politeness. These two things must be considered together and correlated with each other, and first of all, internally. If a person follows generally accepted etiquette, that is, the rules of conversation, but doesn't comply with the principles and norms of communication, then this looks strange, suspicious, and hypocritical, because on the outside he is polite, but doesn't respect his interlocutor. If a person has high moral standards, but doesn't know etiquette, then it will also be difficult for him, since the complex opinion about him will be negative. But if in the second case additional education decides a lot, then in the absence of moral principles, you need to reconsider your significance in the world, give up your ego, and begin to respect other people. What kind of communication norms are these? Since each of them requires multifaceted consideration and analysis, I will give you general principles, and you can study them yourself if you wish. These are: mutual respect for each other, respect for personal boundaries and dignity of the interlocutor, honesty and sincerity in relationships, high quality, careful selection of words for unambiguous interpretation, politeness and tact, the ability to express your thoughts and emotions and at the same time directness, the ability to behave with dignity in the company of other people, maintaining self-control even in difficult, ambiguous situations, adequate reactions to criticism and praise, human treatment and justice, listening attentively to the interlocutor and the desire to understand him. In addition, communication norms include acceptable and inappropriate topics for conversation, personal boundaries which manifest themselves in physical contact and distance to the interlocutor, personal requests for help and advice. Its appropriateness greatly depends on the level of acquaintance, circumstances, and environment. The issue of humor, where again the choice of topic is very important, as well as knowledge of the interlocutor. In addition, there are certain characteristics that should be inherent in your speech: clarity of speech, clear and intelligible conversation, unambiguity of speech, competent formulation and ambiguity, content, the informational value of what is said, following the rules of the language you speak. Firstly, it is understandable and pleasant to listen to, and secondly, it minimizes misunderstanding and logical errors. There are quite a lot of communication norms, and it is very difficult to accept them, not to mention applying them in everyday life. Using them means changing our speech, which means monitoring and analyzing what we say, why, and when. This is a high level of awareness, where your words have a specific meaning, and this requires constant mental efforts. I don't want just to tell you a list, and moreover, I don't want these words to remain just words, since the world now in a state when the words of many mean nothing. Therefore, I would like to convey you why the issue of communication culture is so important. The world is constantly changing, filling with a huge amount of information, largely useless and even harmful. Thousands of events occur every minute, and of course, this is reflected in the culture of communication. One of the main reasons for the gradual loss of culture is the impossibility of assessing it in material terms, and in today's maximally capitalist society, everything is measured by money. A person's focus has shifted to work on material things. Partly, this is a distortion due to a shift in values. Partly, it's the difficulty of surviving in the world, since the world is very volatile. A person is defenseless in the face of a crisis, and he constantly needs to worry about self-sufficiency for himself and his family. So, socialization, friendship, love fade into the background. The perception of people and relationships is replaced by business and consumer, including in the family sphere. As a result, a person is in a hurry. He doesn't have time to comprehend himself and understand who is he and what he is doing in this world. At the same time, a person is focused on himself, on self-satisfaction, on a sense of self-worth, of what he wants to do regardless of benefit and logic. In the modern world, strict patterns of behavior and education have been formed, regardless of logic and interconnection. That is, almost any part of modern life is part of a system which is steadily integrated into its processes, and it is not amenable to any revision or criticism. This leads to pressure from society and the imposition of formulas as it should be. This pressure might be strict social, material, religious standards, the employer, or close relatives. It can result in psychological defense, inadequate perception of other people, and an unhealthy reaction to certain types of interaction. For example, excessive categoricalness, harshness, or conversely, pliability and suppleness, or a feeling of guilt and shyness, or asociality and cruelty, and so on. In any case, extremely sharp opposite reactions. The protection of human rights also brings confusion and misunderstanding. Despite the general trend towards the so-called democratization of society, the meanings of many concepts have been replaced and the meaning have been distorted. As a result, many taboo topics have appeared that cause aggression, triggers, and groundless condemnation, which leads to the erasing of personal boundaries and pressure from society. Wars, conflicts, and crises also reduce the level of trust, exacerbate conflicts, reduce tolerance, erase the boundaries of what is accessible, increase the level of aggression and intolerance, and divide people into opposing groups. And of course, social networks and games contribute, which leads to a low level of speech, lack of live socialization, and stereotyped communication. Attempts to divide the world, pull the blanket over themselves, earn as much money as possible, gain as much power as possible, lead to the fact that various public figures cannot cope with the tasks assigned to them. Instead of creating a world where people have the opportunity to develop, instead of resolving conflicts, instead of finding real solutions to world problems, politicians, businessmen, and other public figures build negotiations on lie, corruption, personal agreements, and indifference to everyone and everything that doesn't apply for personal gain, while diplomacy is the art of negotiation based on certain moral principles, high intelligence, facts, and logic. In the 17th century, French politician François Collier wrote in his book, "Deceit indeed is but a measure of the smallness of mind of him who employs it, and simply shows that his intelligence is too meagerly equipped to enable him to arrive at his ends by just and reasonable methods." No doubt the art of lying has been practiced with success in diplomacy. A lie always leaves a drop of poison behind, and even the most dazzling diplomatic success gained by dishonesty stands on insecure foundation. Negotiation, successfully carried through by the honesty and high intelligence of a diplomatist, will give him a great advantage in other enterprises on which he embarks in the future. Any communication between people is partly diplomacy, but for politicians, this is their work, which must be done honestly, efficiently, and for the benefit of humanity. Otherwise, in the form in which diplomats exist now, society don't need them, since they do not fulfill their socially assigned duties. As a result, very often the interaction between people can be called full-fledged communication with greater tolerance. Very often these are superficial dialogues of people who are either not interested in each other in general or are interested in their own specific benefit. Often, conversations do not have a meaningful context, and the main goal is to speak out, to talk about yourself, to drain emotions, to drain energy as a habit of time spending, and the person even doesn't understand it. Often there is a habit to discuss mutual acquaintances, spread gossip, judge, give unsolicited advices, and get into someone else's life. Due to a superficial attitude to the essence of communication, a person has a superficial attitude towards the interlocutor, which means the inability to listen and hear even if he wants to. Is there any malicious intent in all this? More often than not, no. Often the lack of social skills is the missing piece that, if present, will lead to favorable changes in your life. A developed level of communication will raise your personal relationships to a new level of understanding and mutual respect. Speech culture will help you to realize yourself professionally, since it will ensure successful interaction with people from various fields and will help you to build trusting relationships. It will help you to find a way out of complex situations and will save your time, nerves, and health. Communication ethics will help you to avoid unpleasant situations by respecting other people's personal boundaries and by having your own personal space that doesn't need to be defended with aggression. But this doesn't mean that you should devote a huge amount of time to communication, since in this case you won't be able to create anything. In addition to your time, a large amount of communication takes away your energy and mental resources that you can spend on creation of something useful. And no matter how comfortable, suitable, and simple the current situation and level of communication may seem, no matter how much a person thinks he is satisfied with the current level of speech, there is another aspect that relates to each individual personally. A person with a low level of cultural development who allows himself violations of the rules of communication and liberties in relation to others ends up being alone. He is left alone and doesn't feel real closeness and sincere friendship. He doesn't have the opportunity to share his innermost thoughts, desires, and ideas with anyone, to share joy and sadness, and also cannot go through the life path with his partner. Therefore, even if you are not interested in all these high cultures, businessmen and politicians, world problems, highly moral principles of communications, complex terminology, then high quality and honest communication will allow you to build quality relationships, to build family and friendship. That is, to realize yourself in a social circle. And this is an integral part in successful human life in modern society. In my culture, there is a conditional division of people's communication in 3 levels. At the first level, people talk about people. At the second level, people talk about things. And at the third level, people talk about events. In my opinion, there is even a more developed level of interaction. These are not just conversations, but joint actual activities to change reality and create something that is useful for society. Join this activity, friends, and also develop your social skills. Developed social skills is a huge topic that is impossible to fit even into a series of professional lectures. The thing is, if I just list a list of social skills, it will not be informative in any way. It will be just a bunch of words that you will get tired of hearing. Therefore, I will name the most important principles, but you need to study the whole topic on your own, and I think it's excellent. Since the skill of finding information, its analyzing and processing is very rare in our time, and therefore even more valuable, and it gives you independence. Social skills include the ability to successfully communicate both verbally, words and how they are pronounced, and non-verbally, that is, physiognomy. Or to put it simply, how, in your opinion, my words and what I say correlate with what you see on the screen. By the way, I will be glad to hear your opinions. Social skills include emotional intelligence, which has become a very popular topic over the past 30 years. It includes the ability to correctly recognize one's own and others' emotions and the ability to act on this basis. However, it is important here not to become part of these emotions, not to succumb to them, and not to base your behavior on them, as this will lead to hypocrisy and inappropriate reactions. Social skills include the ability to work in teams, which in general already includes many important skills and reveals your character. In teamwork, you work with many people at the same time, and they have different tasks, social statuses, influence and hierarchy, and you are constantly under pressure, stress and mental load. And your interaction with them shows a lot about your communication skills. However, it may also be that your personal communication will be very different from your public behavior in a negative way, since in personal communication you will not be evaluated by a group of people. By the way, one of the most strongest and committed to the idea social groups I've ever seen is Monero community. These people are fully engaged and give themselves to the cause with all their hearts and souls. Use Monero, it makes you free and unite with great, hardworking and smart people. Social skills include the ability to negotiate, and I am not talking about global things, but about the ability to calmly, correctly and logically explain one's position, find common points of interaction and discover mutual benefits which will lead to joint work, bringing better results and mutual success. Social skills include the ability to manage a conflict situation, when you know how to listen, reassure, maintain calm balance regardless of the behavior and mood of the interlocutor. To do this, you need to be able to put logic and consequences about your ego, emotions and impulsive desires. The same applies to your own problems, since solving them without influencing other people will also allow you to build selfless relationships. How to generally improve the cultural level. In addition to what I have already mentioned about what communication should be like, and that it would be much more reliable for you to find and analyze information on your own, I would also add what is important. Study communication norms, communication culture, ethics and etiquette. Not only with the goal of becoming successful, but with the goal of becoming better. Find a little time to learn more about how people communicate with each other. Real, sincere, and not manipulative. Develop communication norms appropriate for you. Not just how you want to be treated, but how you treat others. Demand more from yourself than from others. Understand how to treat people correctly, regardless of age, activity, experience, or financial situation. Expand your vocabulary. Study books, popular fiction, science fiction, psychological treatises, historical memoirs. Watch difficult films. Rating doesn't equal quality. Minimize the influence of social networks on your worldview, as they lead to communication based on patterns, to communication using memes, and to interaction based on general knowledge of thumbnails from the internet, and not on interaction without social networks. Watch plays. Go to ballet and variety shows. Listen to classical music and opera. Raise different topics in your conversations. You can choose what to talk about. That is, expand your horizons. Observe your speech from the outside. Analyze your emotions and other people's reaction to your communication. Develop your own positive qualities: discipline, accuracy, absence of delays, postponing decisions for later, familiarity. Maintain personal boundaries. Build your own clear personal boundaries and respect others. Reconsider your attitude towards criticism, especially from highly intelligent, experienced people who see more than you do and wish you well. But first, of course, learn to identify such people. Travel and learn other languages and cultures. Unfortunately, I cannot convey here even 1% of what the culture of communication, a high level of socialization, relationships between people and their psychology include. But I really hope that I was able to interest and motivate you to study this important topic. And wherever the reason for starting to study human interaction, please remain humane, sincere, empathetic and kind. High communication skills reflects your awareness and being in the moment, your analysis of the situation, and timely and adequate response to changes. Therefore, the culture of speech carries much more meaning than it may seem. Despite the abundance of meaningless information of what speech of culture is and how to develop it, I am confident that with patience and desire, you will find everything you need. while improving your skills in searching and analyzing information. And to make it easier for you to limit yourself from unnecessary advertising and empty articles, you can use my information security tips from videos number 7 and number 45. Communication is a tool that will bring the results that the one who uses it wants to achieve. And if you used it in a negative way, then you will not make neither yourself, nor your environment, nor the world better. Think about what results and in what areas you want to achieve. It was Valeria, the Off-Road Range. Wish you all the best and see you soon.